Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third virtual session of the third ASEAN Conference on Biodiversity, or the ACB 2020. I am Mika Carada from the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. Today's event, entitled Transformative Change and Innovations in Biodiversity Conservation, will feature on assessing transformative change, how transformative change is achieved through ecological civilization, and innovations in biodiversity conservation. On top of that, we will be hearing from the ASEAN member states for their reactions. Now, let me introduce the moderator for our virtual session today. Our moderator has been with the Agency for Forest Research and Information and Innovation under the Ministry of Forestry and Environment since 1989. Apart from this, she has been actively involved in a number of collaborative research projects for mainstreaming biodiversity and biodiversity conservation, as well as ecosystem restoration. Let us welcome Dr. Titik Setyawati.
Thank you, Mika. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Titi, and it's my great excitement and pleasure that I welcome you to the third virtual session of the ACB 2020, Transformative Change and Innovation in Biodiversity Conservation. This event is organized by Malaysia Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, or KETSA, and the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, or ACB. On behalf of KETSA and the ACB, I thank everyone who is with us today. And now that we are almost to the last month of 2020, most of us are probably planning on what resolution we will be implementing in our lives once the new years come in. The United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity has also come up with a resolution, though a long-term one. It's called the 2050 Vision for Biodiversity. Specifically, the vision is for everyone to enjoy a world that is living in harmony with nature. And to achieve this vision, all of us need to implement substantial and positive changes in our activity and behavior toward biodiversity. Today, our speaker from different organizations will share with us more about transformative change. To start our discussion, we have a biodiversity expert here who specializes in environmental law, international negotiation, and the science policy interface. Our speakers previously led the Office of International Affairs, Policy and Cooperation at the Alexander von Humboldt Biological Resources Research Institute in Colombia. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present the chair of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, Ms. Ana Maria Hernandez Salgar. And 15 minutes time is yours now. Ms. Ana Maria?
Well, thank you very much. And it is as always a pleasure to be with you today. And let me start thanking you for this kind invitation to talk about the transformative change and innovations in biodiversity conservation in the framework of the third ASEAN Conference on Biodiversity. What an important event that you are having right there. It is incredible now, analyzing all what's happening around the world, how the humanity can change its own capacity to live in harmony with nature. So the imminent decline of biodiversity and the various contributions that nature provides, which directly result in deterioration of our own quality of life, is something that is not just theoretical. And I will talk about that right now. So please, if you continue with the slides, the next one. Since the 2012, the work of IPBES as an independent intergovernmental organization which provides scientific knowledge on biodiversity to support better decision-making has been focused on determining knowledge needs, conducting assessments with existing information according to the priorities that are agreed by our plenary, building capacity not only for decision makers, but for experts and stakeholders that work within IPBES and provide spaces for understanding the tools and methodologies that support policy decisions. And in doing so, please, the next slide, IPBES has produced thematic and methodological assessment, and as you can see there, in addition, in doing this 8 assessments that we are presenting as today, not only the 137 member states have been involved, but it's important to state that we have had more than 1,500 experts from more than 100 countries and from different disciplines of knowledge, including natural, social, human, economic, and political science, and also experts of indigenous peoples and local communities that have contributed enormously with diverse knowledge systems to this process. So together, from different perspectives, all the experts and partners and allies and the members have assessed the state of biodiversity and ecosystem services as comprehensively as possible, of course. The next slide, please. So I would talk about the global assessment that is our that was approved in May 2019 and was compiled by 145 experts, authors from 50 countries over the past 3 years, with inputs from another 310 contributing authors. So there's a lot of people involved there. And this global assessment highlights that the diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystems, as well as many fundamental contributions we derive from nature, are declining fast. It is a reality. Although, of course, we still have the means to ensure a sustainable future for people and the planet. So the global assessment is the one that are telling us that around 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with an extinction, and many within decades. And this is a data that is, well, more than ever before in human history. The average abundance of native species, for example, in most major land-based habitats has fallen by at least 20%, mostly since 1900. More than 40% of amphibian species and almost 33% of reef-forming corals and more than a third of all marine mammals are threatened also. So we're not talking about a few numbers of plants and animals. And as you know, by the other side, that more than a third of the world land surface and nearly 75% of the freshwater resources are now devoted to crop or livestock production. The value of agricultural crop production has increased by about 300% since 1970. Raw timber harvest has risen by 45%, and approximately 60 billion tons of renewable and non-renewable resources are now extracted globally every year, and having nearly doubled since 1980. At the same time that this is growing, more than 9% of all domesticated breeds of mammals used for food and agriculture had become extinct by 2016, with at least 1,000 more breeds still threatened. So we are doubling our agricultural production, but still we are reducing the quality and the biodiversity within the agriculture. 3/4 of the land-based environment and about 66% of marine environment has been significantly altered by human actions, and land degradation has reduced the productivity of 23% of the global land surface. cumulative records also of alien invasive species has increased by 40% since 1980, associated also with increased trade and human population dynamics and trends. So if wild and domesticated flora and fauna is threatened, our ecosystems and the contributions they provide are declining. Can you imagine how is the future of all the humankind, which depends on nature to prosper also as a species? And that's the big question here. So the next slide, please. This image is very important because it's showing us that what the authors have ranked as the 5 direct drivers of change in nature. This is the first time at this scale that we present this drivers at this also scale. So these culprits are, as you know, and you can see, changes in land and sea use, direct exploitation of organisms, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species. Those 5 direct drivers result from an array of underlying causes. The indirect drivers of change, which are in turn underpinned by societal values and behaviors that include, for example, production and consumption patterns, human population dynamics and trends, trade, technological innovations, and local through global governance. Also, the rate of change in the direct and indirect drivers differs among regions and countries. Of course, we are not the same in all the regions. So unsustainable use of the earth resources is underpinned by a set of demographic and economic indirect drivers that have increased and that furthermore interact in complex ways, including through trade. Next one, please. Thank you very much. And it is very important here, and this is critical for what we are trying to talk about today, because despite the progress to conserve nature and implement policies, the report also finds, well, the global assessment also finds that the global goals for conserving and sustainably using nature and achieving sustainability cannot be met by current trajectories, and goals for 2030 and beyond may only be achieved through transformative changes across economic, social, political, and technological factors. With this very poor progress on the 2080 biodiversity targets, it is likely that most will be missed by the 2020 deadline that finalized in 1 month, and that was also confirmed by the Global Biodiversity Outlook report that was launched in 1 month ago by the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Is something that not only the global assessment of IPBES is saying, and also current negative trends in biodiversity and ecosystems will undermine progress towards the 80% of the assessed targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, related especially to poverty, hunger, climate change, health, water, cities, oceans, and land. So at the end, and this is very important, loss of biodiversity is shown to be not only as an environmental issue of, okay, the environmentalists have to take care about this. No, also it is developmental, economic, security, social, and even moral issue. So next, please, next slide. Thank you. So the authors of the global assessment also concluded that except in scenarios that include transformative changes, the negative trends in nature, ecosystem functions, and in many of nature contributions to people will continue to 2050 and beyond due to the projected impacts of increasing land and sea use change, exploitation of organisms, and of course, climate change. And climate change, I don't know if you know, but everybody expects that is projected to become increasingly important as a direct driver of changes in nature and its contributions to people in the next decades if we do not change behaviors. So above all, the worst scenario is continue doing business as usual. We cannot continue just in this status quo. So if we want to have a sustainable present and future, we have to review and change social, economic, technical, technological, political, and even legal patterns that are part of the wheel of the unsustainable world in which we live today. Next, please. Doing so, I can tell you that, yes, we can conserve, we can restore, and use sustainably nature while simultaneously meeting global, national, local, societal goals. It is possible. Of course, we need urgent and concerted efforts fostering those transformative changes. We need to enhance cooperation, take local relevant measures, take national and international decisions based on the best available scientific knowledge. And I find of its outstanding importance to highlight that only if we work collectively, and when I say collectively, is government, private sector, academia, IPLCs, all the stakeholders, and including us, all of us as individuals, then we will be ready to address the root causes of biodiversity loss in the most comprehensive way. IPA suggested a series of levers and leverage points to trigger a truly transformative change by tackling the underlying indirect drivers of nature deterioration. And as you can see, this includes, for example, integrating biodiversity and nature in all policies and sectors, agriculture, energy, climate, finances, etc., embracing a different vision of what a good life is, reducing and changing consumption patterns and reducing waste, reducing inequalities among people, practicing justice and inclusion and conservation, and reducing and ending harmful subsidies. So the next slide, and I think that is my final slide, the character and trajectory of transformations will vary across contexts with challenges and different needs, among others, in developing and developed countries. We cannot have the same rules for everybody. Risks related to inevitable uncertainties and complexities in transformations towards sustainability can be reduced through governance approaches that are integrative, inclusive, informed, and adaptive. All the transformations need to cross some key areas for attention, intended to have not only healthier ecosystems and to address the main roots of biodiversity loss, but also looking at the institutional, political, economic, technological, and legal instruments for implementation and accountability, and reinforcing societal goals based on equality, inclusion, and respect. My final message is the following. Transformative change is not a standard recipe or a long list of actions to check. Depending on each territory dynamics, from the local to the global, the decision makers together with the society and based on the best scientific knowledge will have to recognize what it has to be changed, what are the success examples to follow, and what are the new patterns that will lead towards a sustainable future. Some changes are going to be fast and easy, and some of them will take time, decades, and will imply huge efforts and difficult decisions. The level of ambitions depends on the level of the real capacity to assume this challenge. The finalists, I want to inform you that IPBES is currently in the process to develop the scoping document for a new assessment on underlying causes of biodiversity loss and transformative change. I sincerely hope that all of you will be part of the process as authors or external experts of the assessment, which will provide a deeper analysis, synthesis, and knowledge on how to understand and build the transformations we need for a sustainable future. So with this, I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hernandez, for your very interesting presentation. And I would like to, this is very impressive presentation for me. And what you have just shared with us, especially on your statement on 80% of SDG will be missed under the business as usual scenarios. And this is mainly due to failure in addressing biodiversity conservation issue. And you come up with the transformative change scenario that pointing out the role of multi-stakeholder governance intervention to leveraging the critical points through each area that need to be emphasized, covering, if I'm not mistaken, the healthy terrestrial and marine ecosystem, reduced rate of species extinction, addressing indirect and direct drivers of biodiversity loss, implementation and accountability framework schemes, addressing shared objectives in social and human rights aspect, and also including safeguarding genetic resources, which is very much important. And I wish that we could learn more from here, from Ms. Hernandez, and the new insight and also the resolution. Again, thank you for your very informative presentation. Okay, in the case you have just joined us, let me welcome you in a transformative change and innovation in biodiversity conservation. This is the third from the ACB 2020 series in a virtual session. And I'm Dr. Titi Setiawati from Indonesian Ministry of Environmental and Forestry. We have just heard from the IPBES chair, Ms. Ana Maria Hernandez Salgar. For questions, you have to Ms. Hernandez, or for our next speakers, kindly use the Q&A box in a Zoom or the comment section in our Facebook Live video. And kindly include your name and organization and the speaker you are addressing the question to, and you may get the chance to have your question answered live. And let us now have our next presentation. Our speaker is the Deputy Director General and Secretary General for the Biodiversity Committee of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He's also a professor of plant ecology at the Institute of Botany of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Please welcome the chairman of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN, Asia Regional Members Committee, Professor Ma Keping. 15 minutes is yours, Professor Ma.
Okay, thank you. I will share my slides first. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a case from China, how to achieve transformative change and through ecological civilization. And I will try to address the topic through the following points. The political engagement with ecological civilization is very important, and then try to introduce a number of cases in terms of national zoning or planning for biodiversity conservation. And then I will try to give you a special case on ecological conservation redlining for nature conservation. And as for mainstreaming of biodiversity conservation, in China is very important. It is promoted by the top leader, President Xi Jinping of China, and also for the central government release the very important documents, namely opinions of the Central Committee of Communist Party of China and the State Council on further promoting the development of ecological civilization. And key points from President Xi Jinping in address in 2018 set up efforts to establish a legal and policy framework that facilitates green, low carbon, and circular development to promote afforestation, strengthen wetland conservation restoration, and take big steps to stop and punish all activities that damage the environment. What we are doing today is to build an ecological civilization that will benefit generations to come, make new and greater contributions to mankind for both the well-being of the Chinese people and also the whole human progress. So this is a very important signal from the top leaders and the Central Committee, Central Government of China. And say recently, just in September of this year, and China just released a very important position paper associated with the Biodiversity Summit of the United Nations. And China's position paper for the UN Summit on Biodiversity just released in September 21st, and expounded China's experience, achievements, and positions on biodiversity conservation from the aspects of ecological civilization philosophy, domestic policy measures, promoting sustainable development, encouraging engagement of the whole society, promoting global biodiversity governance, and strengthening international exchange and cooperation. That means including 6 parts for the position paper. The paper noted that China will continue to adhere to green development, advance ecological civilization, uphold multilateralism, and the concept of building a community with shared future for mankind, actively participates in global biodiversity governance, and contribute Chinese wisdom to building a community for all life on Earth. At the incoming presidency of the 15th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, China will actively prepare for the COP15. It will work with other nations to achieve an ambitious, balanced, and pragmatic outcome, as well as build a vibrant, clean, and a beautiful world. And also there are a number of very important political events associated with the 50th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. And President Xi Jinping also made a number of statements. And as for the UN Biodiversity Summit, associated with that, he made intervention with a clear signal that China will become carbon neutral by 2060, which is a very important statement from China, and also associated with transformative change for the major development projects and activities. And everyone has a target and timeline to work out the technological transitions alongside the policies and the costs. The upcoming 14th five-year plan will likely contain early indications of how China plans to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. The challenge is surmountable, but requires major and sustained efforts. And he also made statements at the first session of the 15th G20 Leaders Summit, just November 21, and on addressing global challenges and calling for efforts to protect the blue planet. President Xi Jinping just stressed the need to forge a strong shield for human health and safety and build a global community of health for all and completely ban the illegal trade of wildlife. And that is a very important political signal and guidance to practice in China. And I just like to share a case at the national level planning activities and the guidance of ecological civilization theory or framework. There are a number of national level planning is very important. And the first is the major function-oriented zoning for the whole territory of China, and just divided into four areas or categories. And the first is optimized development zones. And second is prioritized development zones. The third is restricted development zones. And the last one is prohibited development zones. That means no development activities allowed, but mainly for the conservation of nature for the last territory. And the second planning is key eco-function regions, and just zoning the territory into three spaces. That means the first one is ecological space, second is production space, and the third is living space in terms of ecological functions of the ecosystems. And then try to strengthen the conservation of nature. China just preparing ecological conservation redlining project. And two kinds of areas would be included in the area of ecological conservation redlining. And first is the key eco-function regions for water resources protection, biodiversity conservation, and so on. And all the protected areas must be included in the ecological conservation redlining areas. And the second part of the area to be included in the ecological conservation redlining area should be ecologically fragile regions, such as desertification, soil wind erosion, soil salinization, and stony desertification in coast areas. And for the ecological conservation redlining categories, and mainly we can divide it into three parts. And the first, supporting sustainable economic development, ecological products provision. This is the first eco function. And then the ECR area, the second function, ensuring human settlement safe and natural disaster reduction. And the third function of ECR area for sustainable utilization of biological resources. That's for biodiversity or nature conservation. And for I just like to emphasize the third function of the ECR area. And I just mentioned all of the protected areas should be included in the ECR area. And now we have about 12,000 protected areas in China, accounting for 18% of the terrestrial land. And even though it is still around 15% of the country's key protected species outside of protected areas. So we will try to use the ECR approach to conserve more threatened species or ecosystems. And this is the figure to show the interactions or relations among different parts of the ecosystems. And for the production space, mainly for agriculture, and then the living space, mainly for urban area, and also for ecological space, mainly for conservation of biodiversity and nature. And we have three, we call it control lines, and to ensure the conservation of nature. And here is the procedure to develop the ECR boundaries and for scientific assessments in terms of vegetation, environment, human footprints, and so on. And then try to balance conservation and development in terms of political boundary, and then try to overlay the maps to develop the ECR areas. And here is a case for the Guizhou province of China. And see, just to follow the procedure I just mentioned, and the final outcome for Guizhou province is around 32% of the area of this province will be preserved in terms of ECR area. And we have quite a few different kinds of protected areas, such as nature reserves, wetland parks, forest parks, scenic spots, geological park, drinking water sources, natural and cultural heritage, and so on. And we have more than 10 different kinds of protected areas. All of them will be included in the ECR area. And we have different approach, top-down approach, bottom-up approach, and try to contact and communicate with people through different categories. And here is the draft map for the ECR at the national level. And more than 25% of area will be included in the ECR area. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ma. Thank you for your very impressive presentation, Professor Ma. I'm trying to highlight some of the important lessons that we could learn from your presentation on how to mainstream biodiversity into all of the government program in China while trying to address all the environmental issue. I'm very anxious actually to know more on your new term called ECR approach called this is like ecological conservation declining, yeah, which has so many initiatives while addressing as well all the ECR category to address the current issue on biodiversity threats, especially in China. And I saw that there are so many cross-cutting issues which will be tackled by the ECR approach. And I hope that this would give us a new insight and resolution to achieve your 2050 vision. And again, thanks to Professor Ma. And I'm sure that you have questions for Professor Ma. And please send in your questions using the Q&A box in the Zoom or the comment section in our Facebook live stream. And kindly specify to whom you are directing the questions to, along with your name and organization. For our final speaker, we have a member of the Indonesian expert team for intergovernmental conferences and conventions, such as IBES. She is also a researcher in the Research Center for Biology, Indonesian Institute of Science, where she specializes in plant ecology and forestry. May I present Dr. Ruliana Susanti? 15 minutes to go, Dr. Ruliana.
Thank you very much for your kind introductions. Good morning and also good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you share my presentation? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, very clear, Dr. Ruliana.
Okay, thank you very much. In this good opportunity, I would like to give some insight and complete what we already hear from the previous presentations. My presentation will focus on how we as a researcher institution conducting research on biodiversity view the transformative change and innovation in the biodiversity conservations. Can you move next? So the focus of my presentation will be highlighting on the ecosystem essential area as part of the conservation scheme innovations and how research complement the policy regarding designations of the essential ecosystem area in Indonesia, or what we call it EEA. Next, at the global level, many centers of biodiversity area are located in occupied area or controlled by community, and many areas are managed by the public and private sector, which is not for conservation purposes, but can still provide conservation benefit. In Indonesia, next, approximately more than 100 million hectares of important ecosystem and buffer ecosystem are located outside the conservation area, and 43% of it have high biodiversity. Protected wildlife such as orangutan and elephant are found mostly outside the conservation area. Thus, the government introduced the concept of essential ecosystem area, or EEA, as part of protection scheme in Indonesia. Next. EEA is an area outside the designation conservation area which is ecologically important for biodiversity. Next, EEA is an area outside the designation conservation area which is ecologically important for biodiversity and established without imposing any change of the function of the area and the status of the land right, in accordance with the prevailing law and regulation. In some cases, the area could belong to private sector. Next. The government already, okay, the government already put it in the law and regulation. As we can see, there are 3 regulations that we can use or stated about the EEA. Next, the typology that can be defined as EEA are, you can move next, wetland ecosystem. It's including river, swamp, pit swamp, mangrove, karst, and shallow water, and wildlife corridor such as the corridor for Sumatran tiger, orangutan, and elephant, and high conservation area and biodiversity park. Next, to develop the EEA, good planning with the support of identification and inventory of biodiversity in the area are important. That is where the science and research support are designated. Research-based decisions also important in the management and monitoring of the EEA. Next, in order to mainstream this concept, EEA are included as part of our national target, or what we call as target national. Next, number 11 on conservation area and number 14 on ecosystem services, in line with the Aichi target number 11 and 14 in our Indonesian Biodiversity Strategic and Action Plan for 2015 and 2020. The indicator included area target and number of EEA with management plan. So it not only as a designated area, but also it has to be completed with a good management plan. Next, up to 2018, we already established more than 700,000 hectares of EEA across Indonesia. There are karst ecosystem, mangrove, wildlife corridor, biodiversity park, and high conservation area, or what we call it as ABKT. We believe that this is a long road and a long process. There are still many areas that need to be identified as EEAs in Indonesia. The government cannot work alone, and the researcher cannot work alone either. We all need to collaborate and involve all stakeholders, including academia, organization, or including also the private sector. Next, our office is LIPI, Indonesian Institute of Sciences, as a government research institution, has responsibility to support data and information for scientific-based policy to support the conservation management, including in the EEA decisions. In order to do that, we extend collaboration with many stakeholders, including private area, in many different scheme of collaboration. So we have collaboration also to designate an area as biosphere reserve in the scheme of UNESCO Mind and Biosphere. And in LIPI, the focus of the research there are in mangrove and seagrass ecosystem, the peat swamp forest, and the karst ecosystem. For example, in the mangrove ecosystem, we established mangrove health index and also MonMang, a mobile application used for mangrove community structure field studies. Can you move next? There are two pictures. Yes. This application developed under Core Map CTI LIPI program. And MonMang are useful for mangrove researcher and observer. It can also be used for by the students and academia. I see here there are many students here to help analyze all the recorded data in the same time while recording. It can also be able to make final interpretation on mangrove health based on selected forest parameter. But this is still we are still improve the application. So we still add more to the application that so to make it easy to use and more informative and useful. Next, I would like to highlight another example of what we already conducted in the karst ecosystem. In Indonesia, the karst ecosystem contain many natural resources and host a high biodiversity and deliver valuable ecosystem services. In order to protect karst groundwater, biodiversity and natural resources, and also ecosystem services, it requires a holistic approach. This is next. This is example what we already conducted with the karst ecosystem research. We start the research on around 2003 because the large area of Indonesia, there are still many parts in Indonesia that hasn't been identified for the karst ecosystem. This picture, so this map shows the distributions of biota in the karst ecosystem in Indonesia. Next, we support the biodiversity. This is the research that we conducted in Banggai Islands. So we support the biodiversity identification and inventory of animals and plants and also microbes, including its collection and database. You can move next. This is the example of the research result. Next, including the mapping for the cars, and geological and else. Next, we also identify specific ecosystem services and identify its direct and indirect threats, so regionally for each area, to produce the recommendation for conservation and management. In Banggai Island, there's already designated EEA as the Banggai Biodiversity Park, but we are in the process now to propose it into larger landscape, including the karst ecosystem as the new designated for the EEA. Next, this is my last slide. For the future, what we understand and what we can do to implement this concept, the transformative change, are including more involvement of scientists, not only biodiversity scientists, but also social sciences and others, and also community through the citizen science. It can be through also social media. As example, we are making as much as possible to disseminate the research result through social media. For example, last week, we made many scientific conferences. In total, there are about 6 scientific conferences that was streamed online on our LIPI YouTube channel. And it proves that there are many viewer in the social media, it's more than thousands viewer in one day, and the event is held for 3 days. So it is very good to use a new theme like social media to promote the biodiversity research and the biodiversity conservation and management. And also including developing mobile application such as Monman. We are also developing for the karst ecosystem now and still not finished yet. We believe that citizen science approach could closer the understanding of the fragile area by broader the communities. Secondly, is with the strengthening National Biodiversity Data Center, including its facility and system. Well, I guess we arrived at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ruliana. Thank you for ending up before time is up. Very perfect timing. Thanks again. It is a very great presentation, I think, because you are introducing the new initiative, what's so-called Ecosystem Essential Area. In Indonesia, it was like Kawasan Ecosystem Essential, ya, Ibu? And this is an area outside the nature reserve area and then nature conservation area and hunting park, which is ecologically important for biodiversity. And this is one of the transformative changes toward the biodiversity conservation action. And I think based on your explanation that this EEA, actually, I assume, which it's going to be contribute significantly, I think, if it is widely implemented. And of course, for the biodiversity conservation and ecosystem-based management. And okay, this is a research-based policy. I think it's very important role. They play a very important role in achieving your national target to strengthen the biodiversity database. And also, it's very impressive that you are using the multimedia and mobile application called Mongma, which is still under process, yeah, Dr. Ruli?
Yes, it's already can be downloaded usually in the
great.
Play Store for
the Mongma, yeah?
Android.
Okay.
Yes.
This is very impressive. This is for karst ecosystem, yeah, too. And the other thing is trying to promote the biodiversity program through the other media, yeah, multimedia. Again, thank you, Dr. Ruliana, for your great presentation. Again, let me thanks to our 3 speakers, Ms. Hernandez Salgar, Professor Ma, and Dr. Luliana. And it is very important that we hear the inputs from the ASEAN member state. And now let me invite to provide the first reaction from the ASEAN member state, the coordinating board member of the ASEAN Institute for Green Economy, Dr. Zhao Naing. 5 minutes, please, Dr. Zhao Naing. Your time.
Thank you very much, moderator Dr. Titi. And thanks very much for the speakers for your well prepared and very insightful presentations. Dr. Kipin Ma from Chinese Academy of Sciences, Ms. Hernandez from IPBES, Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, Dr. Ruliana from Indonesia Institute of Sciences. Thank you very much. We learned from Ms. Hernandez's presentations the global status on the biodiversity, and then we are frightened by the fact that the significant losses of biodiversity by the human activities, our people activities, with what we are doing in business as usual scenarios that is likely to undermine the achievement of our Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. We, ASEAN Institute for Green Economy, believe that economic growth is possible within the environmental limits. That is why we are trying to realize the concept of the green economy, concept of the green growth, in which the safeguarding and preservation of ecosystem services and the biodiversity are regarded as the key pillars. We agree with Ms. Hernandez that we need to drive the transformative change by means of multi-actor governance interactions in integrative, adaptive, and informed and inclusive approaches, and then sustainability scenarios with promoting the environmental consent, changing our consumption patterns. Today we are consuming too much, so we need to change our consumption patterns, social equity, and human welfare, and a balanced supply of the various contributions of nature to people. Dr. Kipin Ma from Chinese Academy of Science also has presented how China is working to establish the legal and policy framework for ecological civilization. China is the largest and fastest developing country in the world with a huge population, the biggest consumers population in the world. But the rapid economic development and the urbanization in China has resulted in severe ecological consequences, including the resource depletion, environmental pollution, ecological degradation, public health concerns, biodiversity losses, and many other undesirable social and economic consequences. I visited China many times in the last 5 years. Every time I visit, I experience the haze, pollutions, etc., etc. So we felt we need to change the way we are living. So especially in China, the social and economic consequences are happening. So Dr. Kipin Ma has presented the political will of the Chinese top leadership to facilitate green, low carbon, and circular development, to promote afforestation, to strengthen the wetland conservation and restoration, and to take tough steps to stop and punish all the activities that damage the environment. We learned the measures taken by our ASEAN strategic partner, China, for the ecological civilization, the ecological conservation redlining, ECR, and then the different ECR categories and their functions, and then the ECR delimitation process with mixed working model of top-down and bottom-up approaches. ASEAN and China's cooperation in environment is guided by the ASEAN-China Environmental Protection Cooperation Strategy papers and the China-ASEAN Environmental Cooperation Center, CAEC, has been established in Beijing since 2010. We, ASEAN Member States, AMS, look forward to collaborate, cooperate, and work together with China to build an ecological civilization, developing the green economy, green growth for the sustainable development of the planet and for the benefits of the future generations, our sons and daughters, our grandsons and our granddaughters. Thanks, Dr. Ma. Thanks to Dr. Ruliana from Indonesia, especially because I have learned and imagined a unique policy instrument in Indonesia, Essential Ecosystem Areas, EEA, an area outside the nature reserve area, nature conservation area, and heading back that is ecologically important for biodiversity. So EEA is the instrument to expand the protections for those important ecosystems, buffer ecosystems, and high biodiversity values, and the important wildlife outside the conservation areas. We learned a lot about the criteria of EEA from Dr. Ruliana's presentation. Thank you very much for that. And we also learned how research and innovation are helping the conservation and management of biodiversity and ecosystem services, and the Indonesia's plan for National Biodiversity Data Center as well. It's also interesting to learn about the social media to be used for the community participation in the conservation of biodiversity. We believe that ASEAN member states may take this example of Indonesia's EEA policy instrument, the research-based policy implementation, citizens' participation through the social media, to apply in our respective nations as and when relevant. I hereby would like to thank again all the presenters for giving all of us a great opportunity to learn from your wealth of knowledge and experience. I also would like to thank ASEAN Center for Biodiversity for organizing this stimulating conference, and I'm happy to join any future conference of ACB and AIGE. ASEAN Institute for Green Economy will look for the potential partnerships for collaboration and cooperation towards the sustainable development of the planet and the ASEAN. Last but not least, I would like to express thanks to the moderator, Dr. Titi. Thank you for your excellent job moderating the panel, summarizing the highlights, and then linking the presented concepts and facts with your experience. But hereby, I would like to raise two questions to the participants, especially from ASEAN member states. So the question number one is, do your countries have similar policy instruments like EEA of Indonesia and the similar vision of ECR of China? And also question number two, do you see any potential collaborations and cooperation opportunities with our friend China and the IPBES? So maybe we start with Malaysia, the host of this ACB conference this year, or maybe with the Philippines, the host of ACB. I hope we all can learn from each other and we all can work together towards the sustainability. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Dr. Zonaing, for your very supportive input. You do have also two questions which will going to be later responded by the panelists. So I will try to note that question. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Khairul Naim Adam, Undersecretary of the Biodiversity Management Division, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, Malaysia, to give the first reaction. Please, Dr. Khairul Naim Adam.
Thank you, Dr. Moderator. A very good and wonderful day to everyone. I would like to also thank the esteemed speakers for insightful presentations, sharing your thoughts, and indeed interesting initiative on transformative change and innovations in biodiversity conservation. Malaysia would also like to express our appreciation to ACB for jointly organized this session with the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Thank you to all also for joining this virtual session. Ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia would like to share insights on this interesting topic. This reaction is also in response to Ling from MNS and also to Dr. Zhao Naing from EIGE. Transformative change means doing things differently that will ultimately alter the norms. It is strategic, although we can start with a small initiative. Malaysia is of the view that there is little understanding about transformative change in each country's context of how to translate principles of transformative change into action, and how transformative change can be leveraged for addressing biodiversity loss. In this view, we would like to highlight a number of initiatives in Malaysia that could bring about transformative change as well. First, we look from the perspective of legislation framework. The amendments of Malaysia's Wildlife Conservation Act would see the inclusion of provisions to enforcement to curb wildlife online trading activities, and also to address emerging issues like zoonotic diseases. Secondly, Malaysia passed the Access to Biological Resources and Benefit Sharing Act 2017 and has successfully acceded to the Nagoya Protocol in 2019. We are happy to announce that we will going to enforce the act in December this year. To regulate the use of biological resources, address issues of biopiracy, and ensure that monetary and non-monetary benefits from the access of biodiversity resources can be shared equitably and fairly with the indigenous and local communities. As for financing, this is on the third point. Malaysia has strengthened the implementation of ecological fiscal transfer for biodiversity conservation to incentivize state governments to intensify effort to protect and expand existing natural forest reserve and protected areas. A specific national budget is allocated in 2021 for the purpose of EFT as an additional incentive to the state governments to protect natural resources. Fourth, the Biodiversity Protection and Patrolling Program, or known as BP3, is being reinforced with the involvement of military veterans and indigenous people as wildlife rangers. Next year, BP3 will be strengthened by recruiting more than 500 military veterans, former police personnel, as well as indigenous people to strengthen the enforcement. Last but not least, a national multi-enforcement agency task force on combating wildlife crime known as Operasi Bersepadu Khazanah or OBK has been formed to curb illegal poaching as well as smuggling of wildlife. It involved the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, Peninsular Malaysia, the Royal Malaysian Police, along with the Royal Malaysian Custom, state forestry departments, as well as other federal and state enforcement agencies supported by various NGO. For ASEAN region, we would like to encourage ASEAN member states to strengthen transboundary cooperation, working together, synergize efforts to make a significant contribution to the region's initiative in achieving the 2050 vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khairul Naim. Now let me open floor to anyone who from EMS that wish to provide inputs of reaction. Is there any from the EMS? Okay, if there is none of EMS who wish to provide inputs now, I think thank you again, Dr. Khairul Naim, for your very supportive inputs and insight. Now we have heard the reaction from the ASEAN member state And let us hear from the organization that the ASEAN formed as a response to the challenge of biodiversity loss, the ACB. Okay, may I present the Executive Director of ACB, Dr. Teresa Munditalim is supposed to be here, but now it was presented by Dr. Kristeri Beleva, the External Relation and Policy Specialist, ACB, who will deliver remarks on behalf of Dr. Teresa Munditalim, the Executive Director of ACB. And now time is yours, Dr. Kristeri.
Thank you, Dr. Titik, for your kind introduction, and good morning to everyone. Executive Director Lim expresses her sincere apologies for not being with us today because of an equally important engagement. We are very honored to have our distinguished panel of speakers who have helped us envision transformative change through interfaces between science and policy for more effective biodiversity conservation. We are grateful in particular to Ms. Ana Maria Hernandez Algar, Chair of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, for sharing your insights on what society needs to do, what we often call a whole-of-community approach to transformative change, taking into consideration the findings of the IPBES Global Assessment. We likewise congratulate IPBES for its recent pandemics report, which provides a wealth of data and information that is necessary for awareness-raising efforts. Truly, IPBES's findings impel relevant discussions in the science policy interface of cutting-edge assessments of relevance to biodiversity and ecosystem services. We likewise acknowledge and thank Professor Ma Keping, Deputy Director General and Secretary General for the Biodiversity Committee of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Dr. Ruliana Susanti, member of the Indonesian Expert Team for Intergovernmental Conferences and Conventions, and Dr. Zhao Naing, coordinating board member of the ASEAN Institute for Green Economy, for sharing your knowledge and guiding us to a deeper understanding of the timely topic at hand. Transformative change risks becoming an empty mantra, one that fits everyone's agenda without meaningfully dealing with substantive change, while calling for a total reformulation of the way things are currently being done. However, leveling off on the understanding of transformative change will reorient the way the ASEAN conducts its cross-sectoral cooperation initiatives. A broader and deeper understanding of how transformative change can induce concrete actions in the region that will further strengthen sub-regional scientific and technical cooperation among the ASEAN member states through the support of the ACB. Again, thank you everyone for your participation in the third virtual session of the ACB 2020. May the comprehensive discussions during this event contribute to putting biodiversity front and center in our regional initiatives and innovations in biodiversity conservation. That's on behalf of Executive Director Mundita S. Lim. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kristeri, for your support for this special and very unique issue on transformative change. And now it is time for our guest speaker to answer your question live. In the case that you haven't sent your questions, send them over using the Q&A box in the Zoom or the comment section in our Facebook live stream. And remember, be sure to specify to whom you are directing the question to, along with your name and organization. And for this, we are going to have 10 minutes for Q&A. I will try to pick some of the questions from my list here. So I will pick the first station is coming from Joji Carino. From Joji Carino. This is, it's going to be good if probably it can be responded by Dr. Ruli or Professor Ma in this case. The questions is, wait a minute. What is the role will IPLC play in the strategy being proposed? Okay, I will give the time for Dr. Ruli or Professor Ma to respond for these questions.
Sorry. Yes, thank you very much for the questions. Let me say it one more time. What is the what role and
what role?
contribution
Yeah,
will
yeah. What role will
local
IPLC?
communities play in
Yeah.
the risk strategy and
Yes.
transformative being proposed?
Yep.
In case in our research center, we always trying to involve the local community because they are the one who understand more about the area where we are conducting the research there. So as in example for the research conducting in Banggai Islands, the one that I pick as an example here, we are involving the local community there in developing the policy, and then also taking their idea and their insight about what their view regarding the ecosystem, because their view and their idea is very important in developing the management plan for the EEA that we are proposing in the local level there. I guess it can, and also in the national level, of course, the involvement of the indigenous people and local community in Indonesia also being one of the part that we are trying to mainstream in our previous IPSA for 2015 and 2020. And we are now developing for the post 2020 and still discuss about it. We are not neglecting the local peoples and the indigenous people and local community. We are trying to work together with them to resolve what the threat that is facing at the local level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ruliana. Professor Ma, are you going to give a response or comment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. And in particular, in recent years, I think the voice of local community and indigenous people went up very rapidly. And as for the strategies or plans developed by government from central government to provincial or local governments, there are such kind of procedures to collect ideas or proposals or comments from indigenous peoples and local communities. And in particular, I have that kind of knowledge in this regard at the grassroots level, say, for the development and management of protect areas at the local level. And there are a lot of interactions between the manager of the protect areas and the local communities around the protect areas. I really appreciate such kind of activities from the managers or local governments. And at the national level, there are representatives from different ethnic groups of China at the National Congress and associate activities. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ma. For Dr. Ana Maria, do you have any comment for these questions? Please do so.
Yes, thank you very much. And with the NIPBES, and as Joji Carino knows quite well, we are trying to embrace all the different knowledge systems, and including the indigenous and local knowledge systems. Those are very important, as we have demonstrated through all these years. The customary law, the traditional practices, and the knowledge about the status and trends of biodiversity in the indigenous territories and the local territories are quite fantastic. So indeed, the indigenous and local knowledge is truly important and necessary to be included in all kind of planification and decision making at local, regional, national, and global level. So for us is always a good reminder to have the indigenous and local communities working together with us and to show us the different views of the world, because the world is not comprised only by one vision or the scientific vision or the political vision, but is a very different inclusive vision, and the indigenous and local vision is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ana Maria. I think we do still have one of the questions that probably can be responded by one of the three guest speakers. This is from Nur Adila Jamil. I would like to read it. Due to the pandemic, the resources consumption keeps depleting, especially in developing countries. Is there any alternative ways on how to handling the depletion? Is any one of you can respond to these questions? Probably Dr. Ana Maria or Dr. Ruliana or Professor Ma?
Yes, thank you. Maybe I can start with the very basic ideas. The first one is that, yes, we are altering the patterns of consumption and of course the production for the new needs that we have had through this pandemic time, and also our behavior has been like, okay, we have to be locked and we are not going to be we are not going to have enough food, so we have to buy a lot and then we have to discharge. And now I think that throughout all this month, we have learned that life is not that kind of fragile situation, but it's something that we have to learn with. And in that sense, it's an invitation to everybody to see how are managing their own consumption at home. I think that we always have to start to reduce our consumption patterns in the family, at home, and seeking what is the best way to live in harmony with nature, but also to respond to our needs. So maybe it's just that we with the pandemic we were afraid of everything.
Yes.
And we didn't understand how to manage things, and now I think that we can see clearly that there's not the end of the world, and we can return to good practices and consumption.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ana Maria, for your response. And then, ladies and gentlemen, actually, I don't want to miss the two important questions that was raised by Dr. Zonai. The first question is about, do your country have similar approach or instruments such as the EEA raised by Dr. Ruliana, and also the vision of the ACR from China? And then the second question is, if I'm not mistaken, is the question about the opportunity of collaboration with China, IPBES, Malaysia, and also the Philippines. And I think I would like to invite a member of AMS to respond to Dr. Zona. This is actually the last question that's supposed to be responded, because we do have a limited time for 10 minutes. Is anyone can respond for this, probably from AMS? Commenting in Dr. Zona questions. Probably is Dr. Adam is still here? Dr. Khairul and Naim Adam?
Yeah, I'm still here, Dr. Titik.
Yeah, can you please give a response to this very important question raised by Dr. Zona?
Thank you for raising very important questions. And for Malaysia, we are looking forward actually to emulate or probably to establish a similar kind of initiative and to strengthen our collaboration with China and other international organizations to strengthening our biodiversity conservation. Back to you, Dr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you for Dr. Khairul Adam. I'm still trying to look for other question if it is there that I haven't mentioned here. Okay, is any question here? I don't think that I can see from the box that question was come up. I think for the question that you still have on your mind and we're not be able to address because we are going to end up this probably another 5 minutes. And the question and answer, it's going to be posted on ACB website in due course. So I think we can finish the question and answer at this time. And before we proceed with the next session, and let us enjoy this short video from IPBES on transformative change. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we go to the next session, we'd like to take another picture. Probably you can show and open your video, Dr. Naim, because we would like the panelists take a picture with Dr. Naim and also Dr. Naim. Okay, everyone, can you please open your video so the organizer can take the picture of all of us again? Is it ready? Hello? Can we take a picture now? Hello? Hello? Could you please open?
Yes, we are taking photos.
Okay, please smile, everyone. Open your video so we can see your nice smiles of this day. Okay, finish? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, my feet getting drier now. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Zonaim. And thank you, Dr. Naim, as well. And also thank you for all the guest speaker. And we have heard the different presentation on the transformative change. And we are almost at the end of today's virtual session. And before we go, here is a new and unique approach of providing us a summary of what has been tackled today. So to give us a visual summary of this virtual event, here is Ms. Desiree from Tofu Creatives. Ms. Desiree, yes? Great. This is the presentation from Tofu Creatives.
Hello, everyone. So in today's session, Transformative Change and Innovations in Biodiversity Conservation, we started with Anna Maria really asking us, what is the future ahead when we have deeply reconfigured our biosphere by human activities? And she discussed about drivers of biodiversity loss and how climate change is one of those dominant drivers. She also mentioned how our political environmental targets will be missed in 2020, and urgent and concerted action is essential, and how we need a collective responsibility to act on this and to get to the root causes. Some of things we could leverage would be embracing the diverse visions of a good life. And she ended by saying that the level of ambition will depend on real capacity to assume this challenge. And then to Professor Ma, starting with saying that there is a strong directive from the president for a low carbon economy and circular development, and how China has a goal of 2060 carbon neutrality. And to get to that goal, there are also approaches on completing ban on illegal wildlife trade, curtailing plastic production, and he discussed more on ecological conservation redlining, or ECR, where we have optimized, limited, restricted, and prohibited development zones. And he also mentioned how ECR as biodiversity conservation baseline and how it can provide for a high quality provision of life. And overall, how China wants to be able to provide a shield for human health and safety. And so for the next talk on essential ecosystem areas, which include wetlands, wildlife corridors, high conservation areas, and biodiversity parks, Dr. Juliana mentioned we cannot do this alone, and it requires a holistic approach. She also discussed about research and innovation in karst ecosystem and how citizen science has been important in understanding fragile areas better, and how this has been one of the approaches in strengthening data. And so as for the reactions, there is mention of green growth, legal policy frameworks, building ecological civilizations together, the utilization of social media, finance incentives for conservation, and how we all need to strengthen transboundary cooperation. And finally, we closed with Chris saying, transformative change is an empty mantra without action. Thank you, everyone. It has been a pleasure drawing the big picture with you all.
Okay, thank you, Desiree. This is really creative way to summarize the session of our three guest speakers. Yeah, thank you again, Tofu Creative. Now, ladies and gentlemen, and for all participants here, besides that very nice and interesting visual summary delivered by Tofu Creative, I'd like to end our today's talk with adding a comment from the perspective of biodiversity conservation in a changing world. First, the importance of how the transformative change is articulated in various ways so that the real action would make a significant measurable changes. And the secondly, building collaborative action among AMS in the ASEAN region to share lessons learned from how the transformative change could be achieved through various innovative ways. And lastly, key sectors play an important role in ensuring that the sustainability transition in ASEAN region are well maintained to achieve 2050 vision. Let's work together. And again, it's been my pleasure to be part of this event along with our guest expert. And let me now call back in Mika for some final message. Thank you. Thank you. Back to Mika now.
Thank you, Dr. Itik, for leading the discussion for today's virtual event. The presentations of our guest speakers will be made available on the ACB website in due course. Please follow ASEAN Center for Biodiversity's social media accounts for announcements on upcoming events such as this virtual session. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and partners, that concludes our virtual session for today. The next and final virtual event in this 4-part series of ACB 2020 webinars will be on 10th December 2020. It will be about business and biodiversity, so I hope you will again join us during this event. On behalf of the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources of Malaysia and the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. See you on December 10.